So let's move forward. Okay, so let's start with the event. That's on March 15. That's the New York Times. Talk about Google computer program beats Lee Sedol, okay, in the Go tournament. Okay, if you watch the movie, or okay, that's the event that really happened on March 15. And then we can kind of examine, how does people's response on that? Okay, the Asian, how about in the technology field? Okay, so let's go to today's subject. Then today is more on the discussion subject, and then a discussion. So we, welcome everybody to talk about your opinion, and then how do you think on everything? And of course, you ask any question you want to ask, about something. So let's start from the Neo-Confucianism. Okay. Anybody want to talk about Neo-Confucianism? We just get a general idea. I want everybody know what Neo-Confucianism. Yeah, okay. So, anybody want to start?
Is it so? As I'm thinking of it, it's basically the way I see it is that Confucianism, the one that proposed by Confucius, is not very metaphysically heavy. Neo-Confucius inject a whole lot of metaphysics into regular Confucianism. It grounds certain customs. It grounds our actions in life. It kind of makes connections between what we do and the universe out there, right? That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, there's a heavy dose of metaphysics, and I'm curious what this metaphysics is.
Any response, Phil? James, please.
Yeah, I agree with that. The metaphysics comes from the integration of Confucianism with Buddhism and Taoism. And because Confucianism is basically a social philosophy, that talks about human beings in a society, but a little bit divorced from nature and from the the metaphysical vision of Buddhism and Taoism. So it kind of connects the social philosophy of Confucianism with Taoist metaphysics about nature, and Buddhism about the metaphysics of enlightenment and being and non-being.
Yeah, I wonder
Thank you.
if there. I wonder if there's a connection between. I mean, Neo-Confucianism seem a lot like Neo-Platonism. There's a bit of parallel, I think. I think there's this tendency toward abstraction, toward the metaphysic, toward the grounds that grounds the world. I mean, yeah. So I think there's some similarity to Neo-Platonism, but of course they're unrelated. But it seems interesting that two people, two different traditions from two vastly different parts of the world, they arrive at something very similar. I'm interested in that.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. About the Plotinus, Neoplatonic. When I read it, I also immediately reflect. That's how it happened in China.
Yeah.
And the Platonics happened about 200, about 150 AD, and Neo-Confucianism is about 1300 years ago. That's about what time? I don't know. Yeah, Song Dynasty, about 1200 AD, so much later than Neo-Platonic. Yeah, James.
Yeah, Platonist metaphysics has to do with the idea of transcendence. There's a very strong dose of the forms that are transcendent somehow. Whereas in the Neo-Confucianism, the metaphysics of it has to do with the eminence of these ideas of about nature, the Tao, and the metaphysics of being and non-being. So there's kind of the difference is the eminence. And eminence in Western culture didn't come until Spinoza, who had this idea of God is in nature itself. God is nature is a kind of a Taoist idea that goes back 2,000 years. Whereas Plato gets away from Heraclitus's idea of this idea of the cosmos. The cosmos is immanent. It's not something outside of you. It's in nature itself. And Plato, positive just the opposite of that. That his metaphysics has to do with the forms that are transcendent and outside of nature.
So, I mean, there's a similar. I would say that Plato's idea of the form is that there is so in this Platonic heaven there is different types of form. I think what appeals to me with the Neoplatonists is that even though there are different forms in the Platonic heaven, there is a single form that is like sort of the grandfather, the mother of all forms, which is the form of the good or the form of the one, right? And if you go back and Neo-Confucianism, there is I think there is also this tendency toward the great ultimate, right? The great Tao, the ultimate, it's very similar to the form of the good or the form of the mother of all forms, right? So Platonism is just that there are forms, but Neoplatonism is that there is one form that is the mother of all the other forms, right? And same thing, there's a hierarchy of forms, right? Neo-Confucianism to me is saying something similar, is that there is the great ultimate, there is this great Tao in which everything else follows.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Because I see the similarity on that. Yeah, thank you, Phil. Any comment on Neo-Confucianism? We talk about. I just want to make sure everybody knows what Neo-Confucianism is. Roughly. And if anybody has any doubt, any question, please ask. Because I want to make sure everybody know. And the famous scholar Zhu Xi, we are going to introduce probably in September. I'm going to introduce Zhu Xi as a Neo-Confucian scholar, and then we will read some about his article and about comment about him. Madeline, please.
Yes, I just want to make sure that I understood it correctly from the article that I read. That Confucius had gathered together, or believed he had gathered together, ancient wisdom into the Analects, and then the Neo-Confucianists were successive generations that commented on his writings?
Roughly, anybody want to respond?
Neo-Confucianism is 1,500 years later than Confucius. So I think where you said the general ideas, right? But I just want to point out there's a big gap.
Yeah, there's a big gap. Yeah, there's a very big gap. Yeah, it's instead of 100, 200 years, it's 1,500 years. So that's very important to know.
Thank you.
Phil, please.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that to me so that it's a little bit more understandable. The thing I want to ask is that, when Mao was, I guess, in his deathbed or was about to die, or maybe after his death, the Gang of Four accused Zhou Enlai of being a Neo-Confucian. They didn't accuse him of being a Confucian, but a Neo-Confucian. And I wonder whether that metaphysics or whatever it is, this higher understanding, stood in the way of Marxism, at least the way they saw it, because there was a struggle in China in terms of that, I guess, a struggle for a kind of control, certainly after Mao, about Neo-Confucianism I mean, if he said, if they had accused him of just being a Confucian, I would have a better understanding, but the Neo part kind of threw me off a little bit. So could you explain that?
Yeah, Pin, please. Yeah.
Yeah, great question. I was refraining myself from injecting my personal bias, but
I just want to I think this one, every explanation is personal bias. So
yeah. So since you asked the question,
yeah, please.
One, I always personally had a somewhat of a dislike for the Neo-Confucianists because they were everything everyone said about the philosophical level, I totally agree with. But the thing, the flip side of that is these Neo-Confucianists really attacked all other schools of philosophy in China. They really took a lot of stuff from the Taoists and the Buddhists, integrated that into Confucianism, which is great, which is fine. And then they turned around and vehemently attacked Buddhism and Taoism, and politically made Confucianism the monopoly on the Chinese people's political and philosophical lives. And also the things like the oppression of women, they really added a lot of stuff that were very controlling and made everything very stiff. Made Confucianism into the super serious, super stiff. The Book of Odes. It was it was love songs. They interpreted every single love song into a political commentary. So every poem in the Book of Odes, in their eyes, was a political commentary. It's just not true. It's ridiculous. And so that's the aspect of them. And I think that's why they've, over 1,000 years between Zhuxi and to modern China, they really built up this resentment that exploded during Mao's era. And that's why I think you're very perceptive. Why did they accuse Zhou Enlai of being a Neo-Confucianist? It's really because of that. It was their attack, on this kind of control the Neo-Confucianists had on the Chinese government and society for 1,000 years.
Well, how will you justify that though, in terms of the contrast between that control and Bao's Little Red Book? I mean, it seems like a singular source, in a sense, I mean, so I understand what you're saying, but to pit one Little Red Book against this totalizing Neo-Confucianism, it seems like that's preposterous because you should open it up to all sorts of possibilities rather than follow the Little Red Book, which is what the Cultural Revolution was about, in a way.
Well,
okay.
Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody, this one we're supposed to briefly make sure everyone.
Sorry.
Yeah, this one is, I know this one we can, and then among all people who know Neo-Confucian, we can discuss for hours. So that's the issue here. The different about the red book attack the Neo-Confucianism, and the difference between Neo-Confucianism and the Confucianism. That's just like I said, every opinion is personal bias, including myself. So, that's why I'm arranging one section to talk about Neo-Confucianism. That's based on the text, so that'll be easy to discuss. Yeah. Sorry about this, but we are going to move forward, and then we will come back. I hope you guys don't mind. James, please.
So the question is not, you're not talking about Neo-Confucianism compared to Confucianism, right? Because
well, you can talk about it. I kind of want to move on. So let's give us another 10 minutes.
Well, I think to respond to what Phil said, about Zhou Enlai being accused of being a Neo-Confucianism, because that's worse than being accused of Confucianism, because Neo-Confucianism includes the possibility that you could be a Buddhist or a Taoist, which is really anti, social, maybe, like according to Mao, you're being too individualistic. You're going off on your own, okay? Because he wanted everybody to play his game, be in the program, and he wanted to dictate what everybody should believe in, which is his red book. So yeah, so that's how I think that why Neo-Confucianism, being accused of that is paramount to being accused of possibly being a Taoist or a Buddhist or any combination of those things that go against the program that Mao envisioned at that time.
All right, thank you, James. Okay, let's have Joseph. Joseph haven't spoken yet.
Yeah, no, I just had it was a brief clarification as to what exactly was taken from the Tao into Neo-Confucianism. Like, I mean, my understanding is that parts of how they viewed nature was incorporated into how Neo-Confucianism was practiced. And this is also incorporated into the way the government itself was actually being run. And so I just want to make sure my understanding of that is correct. Because I know it incorporated.
I believe it's correct. Yeah.
Because I know it incorporated parts of Buddhism and Taoism, like, so that it was like kind of it's a combination of those two. But I just wanted to know what parts of Taoism were actually being incorporated, and obviously the metaphysical aspect of it, but the idea of the way, even the incorporating its ideas on nature itself, is my understanding of that Neo-Confucianism is adopted.
Yeah, I agree. And also meditation, the practice of meditation. But I'm sure there are other things too.
Like rituals, yes, as well. Like the ritual meditations. Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Okay.
Yeah, since you talk about ritual, then we spend a little bit time talk about we don't talk about what is Neo-Confucianism. And I think everybody, at least we know this name, and it's happened 1500 years after Confucius time. So I think that's enough for now. And let's talk a little bit about what's the social impact, okay, or political impact about the Neo-Confucianism. Okay, so that's another thing we can talk about. And one thing I'd like to share is today's famous 4 books. Okay, so the Confucian become like people start to read so-called 4 books. Okay, Mencius, Analects, and what's that? The Great Way. The Middle Way. Okay. What's the other one?
What, the I Ching? Did it? Was the I Ching included?
No, not I Ching.
No, not I Ching.
No. Learn your Meng 大学中庸. Analect, Mencius, and Great Learning, and the Middle Way. Yeah.
Great Learning and the Middle Way. Great Learning. And last month, Pin had a presentation about the Confucius Utopia. That's from the Great Learning. Okay, that's a sector from the Great Learning. Okay, so and that become more important for these 4 books. And another impact is the test, national test. Okay, so if you probably know, all Asian are pretty good in taking tests. Okay, so that's from the training 1300 years ago, and all Chinese start to taking tests. If you can become a government officer, okay, you got to pass through this rigorous, difficult test, and based on these 4 books. Okay, nothing else. They are not going to test you about math. Okay, IQ, geology, history, only based on these 4 books. So that's another social impact, and it lasts in China for 1300 years. Okay, so but put it another side, it sounds strange, but actually compared to the Western society, okay, it's much more advanced. In my personal point of view, it's much more advanced, because if you look at that time in before the Enlightenment time in West Europe, the common people have no way to become an officer, okay, become in the government, play a role in the government, but only in China you have to wait. Okay, if you are poor, you are farmers' kids, you still have a chance to become the prime minister. You still become a great general. Okay, so that's a great invention, I think, during that time. But they of course, they have the bad impact. But be fair, during that time, if you take about 1,000 years ago, that's a great invention. That's my opinion, my bias, if you want to take. Let's go from James and Philip.
So even in Confucius' time, wasn't the Book of Songs and the I Ching included? And when was that, dropped from the,
Okay.
They were not dropped.
Not dropped, yeah.
Yeah, it just, actually all the 2 of the 4 books are from Li Ji, which is one of the 5 classics. So they took out these 2 chapters and said, oh, these are really particularly important, and put them at the equal place with the other classic books. So they got promoted. Yeah. So, but nothing was dropped. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nothing dropped, but but you can think about the situation if the national test, okay, is only one test, only test on 4 books, okay. So what are you going to study? Okay, you only study these 4 books, okay, because I think that's the situation, because it's not included in the test. Okay, so that's another thing, and I'm preparing to have a section in August, first week of August. I'm going to talk about I Ching. Okay. So I think a lot of people talk about this one, and eventually I think I got a way to talk about this. So it's a difficult subject, but let me try to get through on this.
Just to clarify, it's the 4 books and the 5 classics for the test you had to do.
Okay.
Not just the 4 books, the 5 classics.
Well,
also.
but this one I did a little bit disagree with you, because to the later part, they only test on the 4 books.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's into the later. At the beginning, probably not. Well, we can talk about this, but that's like
Are you ever gonna cover the Book of Songs?
You mean you want me to cover a book of songs?
Yeah, I'm just gonna ask if you're going to ever.
If you have an interest, that's not a problem. I think Pim probably good on that, right?
I've only read tiny little parts of it, but I can work. You and I can work on it and study a little bit and cover that. Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah.
Jen, you have interest, or you have any background about the book of songs?
Yeah, because I have some some volumes of the Book of Songs, but I never really gone through them. But they seem to be important, because it's been preserved, as a classic.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because I try to balance, not keep going backward. I try to move forward, but look like the people are more curious about the backward, the old ancient time. So that's the part I'm struggling. But I work on that. Be patient. Gradually I will try to work on satisfy every request.
Yeah, it seems like there is more wisdom by going backwards. It seems like there's more wisdom.
Oh, come on. Backwards. They also have a wisdom today. So. Okay, I go to Phil, please.
So from your brief explanation, I'm beginning to understand. But even though our Confucianism was very formalized, what you're claiming is that Neo-Confucianism was much more institutionalized and much more structured, and also the hardening of the bureaucracy that actually made it a difference, right? Because the institutionalization and the bureaucracy began to have a much tighter control on the difference and the variations of the formalism that Confucianism had, and that exactly something that strangled the culture to a certain degree. Is that what you're kind of saying, and it's a general statement?
Yeah, I agree with you, and you summarize well. But I'm not sure how other people's opinion. But at least that's just like I talked to Pin. Every opinion about your computer, it's just your bias. So you have the same bias as I have. So put this way.
Well, but what I'm saying is that the Chinese had a very, very strong bureaucracy. So I'm just wondering at what point it became so hardened and institutionalized that it was really detrimental to the motion of the culture.
Yeah,
in that sense.
That's a big subject. Then, Pin,
Yeah.
you have a quick answer on this?
All right.
Yeah, I agree with what Phil said, but I just want to give Neo-Confucianists a little credit. They also place a lot of control on the bureaucracy, on the emperor.
Okay.
So the emperor,
Yeah. Okay.
normally during the last 1,000 years, the emperor had a Neo-Confucianist teacher that started teaching the emperor since he's an infant. And this teacher would exercise a lot of control on the emperor, brainwash him, and that was a good thing when you were in a dictatorship like that. The emperor was bound by a lot of expectations and norms.
Okay, we need to move forward quickly. Let's go to Madeline and then Felix. Okay, Madeline, please.
My question is about the national exams on the books. It seems to me that probably it's really a question. I'm just going to put it in the form of a speculation, but I'm sure someone here knows the answer. Probably the questions wouldn't just be on the content of the books, they would also be on the commentaries and interpretations. Yeah. So it would be as if, and you would have to know which commentaries and interpretations were appropriate for your time. And you might even have to be kind of gambling which one was in the ascendant in terms of what was going on politically. So it would be as if you were being questioned on, say, the Torah, and you would be asked to know.
I can give a quick answer on this. The answer is Zhuxi's interpretation is the only interpretation you have to read.
Yeah, but the test questions would be kind of like what Madeline described. Often it would take a kind of a current event at that time, and then cite and give you a quote from one of the books and ask you to write an essay on how to connect the two things. And whoever had the best essay would, be picked as the winner.
Yeah, the exam, only the exam is also very interesting story, and they have a lot of story we can share. What kind of test, and some tester got in trouble because he get the wrong question. Okay, so that's a lot of thing here, and how to interpret. And Zhuxi play an important role. So that's why I want to start with Zhuxi, because he probably the most important figure, in the Neo-Confucianism. Felix, please.
So 3 different comments. First, I feel like Neo-Confucianism is, I don't think it has that much of an effect on the bureaucracy of China. China has always been big. There's always a lot of people. The economy was huge. How do you control a country with so many people, with such a diverse big economy at that time? Well, you have to have a bureaucracy of some sort. You have to have a way of funneling people, do the ranks, the society, and in this way, they use examination as a way of funneling people from the bottom to the top, and it's a way of control, right? If you have a big country, how do you control this big country? Do examination, do a very tight bureaucracy. So this is just a natural evolution of how society grow, as it becomes bigger and more massive. The bureaucracy naturally, go up. So I don't see that as Neo-Confucius affecting that. Rather, I'd see Neo-Confucius as what grounds Confucianism. Neo-Confucius is what gives Chinese philosophy, what makes Chinese philosophy into something very similar to the Western philosophy, in that, there's all this talk about, laws and all these, it doesn't make sense if there's no metaphysics. Metaphysics is what grounds why you're doing something, right? This is true in Western traditions. Now, it's not it's not about authority. It is about what grounds what. And metaphysics, you cannot avoid metaphysics if you ask a question of what grounds what you're doing or what grounds what you're saying. It's inevitable that you're gonna have to invent some sort of metaphysics. And the third thing is, I think it's very similar to Torah study. Zushi, I think, is the important figure in Neo-Confucius, but you can think about his role is kind of similar to in the Torah study, Maimonides, right? The Maimonides you think about the relationship between, Talmudic scholarship, right? Right. You think about the Torah. If you think about Torah, Maimonides, and then later commentaries, Torah scholars that comment on Maimonides. You think about the role of, I would say, the Torah in this case would be the analog, Confucius' original work. Maimonides would Sushi would be in the role of Maimonides, and everyone else would be commenting on Maimonides, right? Maimonides is a Jewish scholar. It's supposedly very, very important. I think it's there's some Jewish people in the audience, so they can tell you more about that.
Yeah,
but,
that's so-called second Moses, from Moses to Moses.
The Moses. Yeah.
Yeah, the second Moses. Yeah, great. Thank you, Phillips. And that's a great comment about about the Neo-Confucianism. Like, first the bureaucracy, they have their own advantage, the test, and it ground as a philosophy. And sometimes I view Zushi as a Kant, okay, in the Chinese, and then another is so I think that's quite important. But I'm not planning to talk too much about the Neo-Confucianism, but I'm surprised. Just like Pin said, it's a personal bias, and it's a bias. Everybody have a different opinion because that's a very difficult subject and a lot of opinion. So I'm going to assume everybody, has opinion on Neo-Confucianism, but at least everybody know, okay, what we are talking about, the Neo-Confucianism. Okay, so let's move on about the Go game. Okay, so it's a traditional Chinese game. Anybody want to? First thing, I want to make sure everybody know, okay, what's Go game, and then I'd like to have people know Go game experience and share experience and about Go game. We already started at the beginning. Okay, talk about Go game, and then anybody want to talk about this game? Anybody play?
Yeah, I play.
You play, right? I also play, but I'm very bad. So Pin, you want to share about your experience? You still play?
I'm like you. I actually just started playing a couple of months ago.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just novice.
Yeah, I played when I was like 7 years old. Okay, so I have a lot of experience, but I never advanced from the beginning level. So no talent, and that's the people said. So that's why I'm not continue to play. Phil, please.
Yeah, I could say something about it, even though I'm not an expert. Certainly not.
Okay, you are the best among us. So
well, what I would say there's two very important factors. One is the strategy, which is to see the overall relationship of all the whole board. The other one is the tactics, which is sort of more a technical move, how you sustain a certain segment of the territory. And it's very abstract in a way because the strategy is very important because that's when you place the stones in a sense to place the kind of influence on a particular aspect in relationship to the whole. But the influence only remains an influence if it's protected tactically when somebody attacks and make an opposite approach. Now, what happens to very, very basic beginners is that they end up playing a tactical game, which means that they're going to run over the board wherever leads, and then what happens is that at the end, there's kind of like eventual winner because of tactical moves that happen. What a more advanced player, and certainly a master would be, is that they would strategize all the stones in an influential relationship, because the influence creates the probability or the expression of possibilities, maybe that's a way to do it, that it could happen. So an advanced player is always playing on controlling the possibilities, but he has to always be watchful of the fact that the possibilities could fall apart when he's not tactically protecting the possibility from unfolding, because the enemy has something to say about that. Now, I was always very, very advanced at the strategy level, because usually when I play with somebody, they were always surprised that the way I play, it seemed like, wow, you know, like this guy is a lot better than his ranking would be, right? But I always fall apart in the technical part because I do not know how to protect it as well. And so therefore I fall apart in that. So you have to have both. The most important thing is you have to have the strategy, the overall field, the generalship, you want to call it that way. But you also have to have the tactics, which is sort of like a junior officer, you know, like the majors and the captains and then finally the privates and so forth, to guard the possibilities in that relationship. Because if you don't have that, it will eventually fall apart. Your possibilities were there, but it no longer exists because you didn't protect it. So those two parts have to coordinate at the right time for it to really be successful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Let's hear what Kevin wants to say. Kevin, please.
Yes, thank you, Jason and Xing. And
first, can you tell me, do you play Go?
Not so often. I play Chinese chess or international chess with my son. But because it's time consuming, you know, that's like
I know it takes 4 or 5 hours to finish.
But I also play the mini version of a tic-tac-toe with the wood or use pen and paper. That's a similar concept. Basically, it's play deep. That's a better understanding yin and yang and white and black, how they compete each other. It's not one's philosophy of the game. It's not about how many. It's like in international chess, you play. Let's say I eat your horse or something, the big one, the point. In that chess, Go is based on your area you controlled, how much you own. That's eventually they're going to count based on that, not based on your, let's see, or you attack the king. You can see no centralization in the Go. However, it's sometimes individual make a difference. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Audrey, please. Yeah.
Maybe one more thing. Sorry.
Oh.
So
Philip, do you want to say something quick?
So this event, Asian Philosophy, is part of the Philosophers and Gamblers meetup group. If you are interested in hosting events, please contact me through PM. The group's name is called Philosophers and Gamblers. You guys can Google it. I'm very interested in Jewish philosophy. I'm interested in Jewish scholarship. I'm interested in other kind of meetup ideas. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Audrey, please.
Hi, yeah, I would think that strategy, I guess I'm speaking more to Phil, but I would think that strategy encompasses both. Because if in the military, I started reading The Art of War. I mean, in the military, you have to have an idea of where everything is and how to protect it. It's part of your overall strategy. And so then the stratagem becomes those smaller, what you're saying is a second tier. It seems like it has to go at the same time. Am I wrong in that? I mean, you can't have a strategy overall if you're going to lose protection. So I guess.
No, you're right about that. You're right about that. But on the other hand, you only have one move at a time. If you're forced to play a tactical game, then what happened is that you lose control. I compared this to Germany in World War I. They had a magnificent plan. They understood everything. But on the other hand, they didn't account for the fact that the enemy has something to say. And when the field officers call back to central headquarters, say, look, things are not happening the way you think it is. You know, you got to change your plan. The Germans would say, our plan is a wonderful plan. We're just going to go forward. And then what happened is they end up losing. So,
right.
so you have to have that sort of mutual communication to get the new input in the tactical field that unfolds, but you have a kind of general office that sort of say, now we have to change the strategy because the tactics demands it.
Right, I understand. So basically you have to have eyes and understanding of what's going on the ground.
That's
and
right.
In a game with two people, I would think that the communication would be easier. But I don't want to, I'm just going to start to learn the game, so I can't speak to how it actually plays out. But I find that when we were watching the, I don't know how many people actually saw the documentary, but I remember when Sedol, is that how you say his last name? Lee Sedol?
Lee Sedol, yeah.
The game that he won, you know, he kept saying like, oh, you know, the game, the AI is he's more open. He's doing all these things that he's not following a certain path. He's changing his tactics, and he always considered himself someone that constantly could change, and that he had an artful way in his actual playing of not sticking to one thing and confusing his opponent. And he did this. He didn't look happy when he did it, but he did this in the one game that he won. But he was still concerned that it probably wasn't as artful as he wanted it to be. So I found that very interesting. And I was trying to relate that part of the documentary with why, you know, your question later is, you know, why was the Go's victory over the Korean master, you know, was a problem for, I don't want to say the word Neo-Confucianism again, but basically why it was you know, a problem, or how it affected those values. And I was wondering if Lee Sedol was the crux of that.
Well, yeah, that's we will discuss it. But one thing I'd like to point out is the tradition, most of the chess, okay, we have a clear goal, right? We want to catch the king, okay? That's a clear goal. But Go has no such a clear goal, you know, it's all over the place, okay? You just have to make sure you occupy more space. And when you think about boundary, if you draw a boundary to circle, and that's my territory, but your boundary could become other people's inside, right? So you will turn out to surrender your boundary. So that's the trick here, and that's the difficult part. That's just based on my personal experience. Then let's go to Madeline. We have a lot of hands up. Then we have Madeline, and then James, Sanjay.
Yeah, I was thinking about, okay, so I don't play Go. Like many people, I've sort of known what it is for a long time. And I learned a lot about it watching the videos and doing the reading. I have tried to play it. That was a long time ago. I'm thinking, I was struck by two of the metaphors that are used in Go. One, and they're related to each other, I believe. One is the metaphor of surrounding other stones. It's called taking prisoners. And so it makes it a war metaphor. And I was thinking of other metaphors that might be used. One might be that the other player is planting crops and I am harvesting them. Or it could be that the other stones are, I'm a stream, and the other stones are rocks in a stream, and once the stream divides around them, it sweeps them away. That would be me taking them off the board. So those would be alternate metaphors for the prisoners one. One thing about prisoners in war is that to some extent we have to dehumanize the opponent. Otherwise, no one could ever do it. We wouldn't be able to do war. And that brings me to the idea of the eyes, the two eyes, the live area. When you look at the world around you, the natural world, whatever your philosophy is, something with two eyes that is looking at you is indisputably a sentient being. Doesn't matter what you think of, you know, a beetle or a plant or something. Even a lizard is an animal that's going to interact with you. And so the fact that those are left alone, but yet groups that are filled in and become prisoners and kind of dehumanized or captured seem like interrelated metaphors. And I'm wondering if anyone who plays could comment on that.
I can share with the name we use. Okay, at least in my time, we use the eyes. Okay, that's the correct name. But I never heard use a prisoner. Okay, so I think that's probably just the English name to help people understand. But at least I don't hear this name as a prisoner. We just say, you know, you get it. You know, it's very simple. You know, nothing about war. You know,
Sure.
but we use the term eyes. Okay, so. That's almost like a first lesson I learned when my grandpa taught me, you know, they tell me, make sure you have the two eyes, you know, that's it. So,
Yeah, I think prisoners came from the video that you.
yeah,
you
it's
took.
come from the video,
Yeah.
not from the,
Yeah,
at least
right.
I'm not aware of the call it the prisoner, but I think the prisoner is a good way to explain, but at least we don't use the name. Yeah. Next will be James, please.
Yeah, I don't play Go, but I can, you know, relate to how it is a kind of a war game, you know, just like chess is, but it has to do with deterritorialization, you know, like occupying, you know, territory, right? But I don't know why in the Chinese history, they, you know, even though people could enjoy playing Go, but didn't apply that kind of philosophy or way of point of view to actual, you know, process of in politics, global politics. And so maybe, you know, instead of being the colonizers, you know, the deterritorialized agent, it was a victim of colonization. Before he finally, you know, was able to get enough inspiration to change, you know, just train and see. So I think in this game there's a lot of, you know, the importance of adapting to change and being able to cognize the changing circumstances of life and of the situation. And maybe how it relates to Confucianism is that it's kind of a Confucianism is kind of a fixed philosophy, a kind of dogmatic philosophy that is not amenable to change. You know, it doesn't. It resists adapting to change. That's some of the drawbacks of Confucianist philosophy.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, Sanjay, please.
Yeah, so I mean, there's several things. As far as Go, I mean, I've also played, but I'm not a very good player. I don't have as much time to play, and I definitely don't have any good players to play against. But The simplest way to compare it is, for most people who are on this meeting, perhaps they're familiar more with chess, and chess and Go are not in the same realm in terms of complexity. But for people who don't know Go, it's the closest I think that we can compare against. But also it shows the difference in style of what the two games represent. I mean, at a simplest level, several people talked about this, but these games, all games that have a zero-sum outcome basically are competitions where somebody has to win. And it's a simple metaphor is that of war, that there are two sides and one side is trying to dominate the other side. And this applies both in chess, we know that, and it applies in Go. The difference is that in chess, the individual pieces have a hierarchy. Some pieces are very, very superior to others, whereas others are very weak. In Go, it's nothing like that. Every piece is identical on both sides. No piece has any more strength than another. So the style of play is very, very different. You can't rely on the pieces that are on the board to do anything differently. It's completely based on where you're going to place your pieces. Also, both boards represent, you might say, a country that is at war, and you have two armies that are competing against each other in this war. That's the simple version of pretty much every zero-sum game. But the difference is that in chess, you typically have a very few number of players. You might have your queen and a rook and perhaps a knight who coordinate together and build a strategy to do something to trap the opponent's king. But in Go, you can't do that. You basically, the entire board, you have to keep in mind the entire board in the situation. But not only the board, it's the spaces within the board, the specific regions, whether you have strings or whether you have individual pieces. You have to look at the, I think the term is breadth. You have to look at this expanse of the entire country, you might say, the entire battlefield. And you have to have this understanding of what that represents. Chess is a very fast-paced game in the sense that you can have a single move that completely changes things. In Go, that can happen, but it's very rare for that to happen. Usually, when a person gains an advantage, especially if the two players are comparable, for somebody to gain a significant advantage, it's done through many, many small moves. It's done incrementally, very slow. And looking at these two types of games this way, we start to see differences in Western thought, Western philosophy, and Eastern thought and Eastern philosophy. And I'm using the term Eastern thought, not just Confucianism, because I have a strong background also in Buddhism and Hinduism. And I know that Confucianism has many elements of Buddhism, which basically is an outcrop of Hinduism. A lot of the belief systems are very, very similar. So all Eastern thought share a lot of common threads. And so when we compare Go with chess, a lot of this starts to come out. I think when we go into the movie and what happened with AlphaGo, it'll get more complicated, but there are a lot of things that we can really understand from this game. This game really represents philosophies, differences in philosophies between the East and West. And I really like how this meetup was structured in that way, because I think it'll help us. This discussion should be very, very interesting.
Thank you, Sanjay. Yeah, yeah, that's okay. That's why I feel like, probably watch the movie, probably will know a lot about, if you know how to play chess, I assume, and you will probably know a lot about difference between West and the East. Next, we'll go to Fred, please.
I appreciate Phil's discussion of strategy and tactics, as well as Sanjay's comparison with chess. So to kind of meld the two, I play chess and I'm intrigued by Go. So I know the rules, and I've lost a couple times. But Dr. Yue, a grandmaster in chess, wrote a book called Strategy Classic, called Strategy and Tactics in Chess. And he sums it up by saying that. Hello?
Excuse me, is anybody, can you, if you are not speaking,
Alan,
can you turn off?
that's a
turn off
message
your
to
video?
Jason. Can you mute her or she can mute it?
Who,
It's called
who,
Alan.
who has noise? Can you please mute himself?
Ellen,
Yeah.
Okay, so, okay, that's fine.
Ellen needs to mute herself.
Okay, go ahead, go ahead. Sorry.
Grandmaster Yue, he sums it up by saying that strategy is abstract and tactics is concrete. And there are philosophical implications to that, of course. But one thing that strikes me, and this is a question as much as an observation. In chess, we now have such a repertoire of games that if you want to gain real proficiency in chess, you have to quit your day job and you have to devote 12 to 16 hours a day of learning and memorizing what are called the book moves, which is this vast compendium of existing chess games. But it occurs to me that perhaps that in Go, the search space of possible moves gets so large, so fast, that you can't possibly have this compendium of, you can't just memorize existing Go games and expect to be a great player. Do you think this is correct?
Well, I think it's correct, but the next part we will move on the how does computer play Go game. Then we will know. Yeah, it's difficult. I think you basically you talk about right thing. So Pim, you are next. You probably can answer.
Oh, like I said, I'm very novice in Go, but it seems like, yeah, I agree with your statement, Fred. There are books one can study, of course, but it seems like what's considered this, it's almost like fashion. Every 10 years, there's a new discovery of the best way to play certain situations, and this keeps evolving, in my meager understanding. I wanted to follow up on Audrey's point. When she was talking about the characteristics of the computer as a player. And yeah, I think in a way the computers kind of models certain Taoist and Buddhist philosophy. The computer is emotionless and has no attachment, unlike the human beings. So I think the humans, when we play, we're humans, we have emotional responses. We sometimes we get too stuck on winning a small battle in a small area of the board, and then you may win that, but you lost the whole game. You just get obsessed about saving a certain little area or chasing down trying to take away pieces from the other side, but it's really not advantageous. And also we may think we have a certain style and we get stuck to it. So these attachments and emotions, and the computer doesn't care, obviously. The computer just computes and does whatever it computes. So anyway, just it was an interesting thought.
Thank you, Pim. Who's next? Kevin, please.
Yes, thank you. I very impressed. Sanjay, I'm going to follow Sanjay. He already good. For me, if you go, the king is yourself. So honor the chess itself, all look like equal, but the key, how do you use those each item? That's make difference. And normally start with corner. That's the area matters. Eventually, they decide the game who wins. How many they call the move or eye you can eat each square. If you got more square in your territory, you win. And in the regular chess, however, the hierarchy there. We have king, both Chinese chess and international chess have king. In Chinese chess, got two guards. And in the Western chess, hopefully not off it about the chess, okay. It's, we have a queen. So that's for me, why the queen role is so important in the international chess, why they set that question for me. The rest is very similar. So it's, for me, that's, you know, Sanjay also really mentioned the religion, the perspective. That's defining something. It's God, where's the God, where's the king? It's in your mind or in a paper, you can't see it. In a regular chess, you can't see the kings in the paper. You protect the king. When you kill king cannot move, you lost the game. And the goal is not, doesn't matter. Those items, it looks everyone equal. End of the game is based on how many areas you can occupy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Who's next? Phil and Pin, then Joseph.
Yeah, I have 2 points to make. A couple points that came up about the difference. You know, like, I think a couple of things is important to underscore. Go is a multi-front game. First of all, Go, the strategy is move from the outside inward. The inward territory is much harder to defend than the outward territory. So move from the out in, whereas chess seems to be more like concentrated in the middle and moving outwards in a different way. And because chess, even though there's coordination between the various pieces, nonetheless, they are moving primarily in a single front, which is to attack the king. And sometimes you sacrifice to do it. So you do that also in Go. But whereas Go, it's multi-dimensional. And so there's a much more intimate relationship between the strategy and the tactics. Although the strategy is still very, very important because it unfolds in a multi-front manner. I am convinced that America lost the Vietnam War because we were playing chess and they were playing Go. And what happened was that, you know, we had the power, we moved the tanks, we moved this back and forth, but they just withdraw from one place and attack another place. And this constant shifting attack, it became so dynamic and confusing that it occupies a much more dynamic force to even try to contain it. So in that sense, it's very, very different because, you know, you could call it guerrilla tactics or whatever, but it's a multiple shifting tactics because it's not really committed to any particular place, but it's a multi-front as long as you get something. But it is an adversarial game. There's no way around it. It's not like everybody loves everybody, let's try to build something together. There is captures at the end. For instance, when you capture a separate army because they didn't have two eyes, in a sense, those become spaces which you occupy. They were prisoners that occupy a space that's no longer theirs. So in some sense, there is a capturing of the enemy who are now dead. They still remain on the board until the end of the game when you remove them. But nonetheless, you know that that is your territory, is safe as long as somebody don't make a breakthrough and somehow liberate them in some tricky way. Okay, so in that sense, the other thing is also the creative element that's added to it, because all games have a limitation, not only in terms of boundaries. Let's say if you play chess or Go, and let's say the board just keep expanding, it would be a very, very different game. I'll take American football versus Canadian football. I remember back, I think in the 1990s, there was a strike and the American football and nobody played. And the Americans were so desperate, they were watching Canadian football. The Canadian football was 10 yards wider. It just seemed like an endless field. You could run everywhere. You know, it's a different game because become a much more open game, whereas the American football is tighter. So you have to you have to make your breakthrough in the middle, because you can't just keep running and just run around somebody, because if you just have a really fast person, you could just run around everybody. So in that sense, the tension between American football and Canadian football is completely different. Okay, so the constraint, number one. The other thing I want to say is that I remember when I was at Berkeley, there was two guys who were very, very good. I mean, in relationship to this country and at Berkeley. I think one guy was 2 dan or maybe 3 dan, and the other guy was definitely lower, maybe 2 dan or 1 dan, okay? But I think the guy who was like a lower rank just said the rules were too restrictive. So finally, after a lot of dialogue, the guy who's higher ranked said, okay, let's change the rules slightly. Instead of having just 2 eyes for a living group, let's have 3 eyes. Now the tactics completely change. That's kind of like suddenly you could paratroop in and move a kind of tactical team from the other direction and capture 2 eyes simultaneously, but you still have a 3rd eye, right? That you need to capture. You know, unless you have another fly-in, you know, Navy SEALs or something of that sort. And it turned out the guy who was lower ranked was actually a better player because it was more creative. He was able to see a new situation better. The other guy was stuck in the old-fashioned structure, and then suddenly, no, I have to protect it with creating a 3rd eye. How do I do that? So the creativity becomes more important when the rules are changed slightly. So part of the thing is you have to figure out how to change the rules when you're playing the game when the rules remain the same. Because the rules becomes different if you just one eye more, completely different. The guy who was much lower ranked just beat, well, I would say handily, but beat fairly easily the other guy who was much higher ranked. So therefore, in a sense, don't get trapped by the rules themselves, because you also have to be creative within the rules structure itself. So creativity becomes a very important thing. Whereas if you know the rules very well, very, very well, you all know all the past games and everything else, you know all the little tricks, then you're going to be a better player in one sense, but not if the game should change slightly. And that's what also happened in the Vietnam War. We were forcing the situation, and they were just changing the rule. They were cowards. They ran away. I mean, why don't you fight like a man? Just like the British lost because the Americans were shooting with the long rifles from the trees, and the British were marching up, you know, with the redcoats, like fighting a real war. So
yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Pim, please.
Just to add 2 differences between Go and chess. Chess is based on movement of pieces. And Go, I think, is fairly unique that all the pieces are equal, like many have pointed out, but the pieces don't move. You place them and they're set. But the game actually is very dynamic. It has movement in the sense that you build connections of pieces, and so your pattern changes. Another thing is the way that the game ends is very different. Most board games like chess have very clear ending when you quote kill the other side's king or whatever. Chess is basically when the 2 people playing agree that they both are out of moves, where the game is so clear who is gonna win eventually. You just agree and say, okay, yeah, we're done. So I think that's another unique thing about Go.
Yeah, thank you, Pim. Joseph, then Felix.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to actually make that kind of that similar point. The idea, I mean, you can, and I've only played Go sparingly before the pandemic hit. I was actually starting to play. But the idea of inaction and that you can pass at a certain point in time. And I thought about this and the idea of space and how that relates in philosophical terms, or if you want to relate it to the art of war, of the way other people have already spoken about, the idea of inaction in that sense as well. is that, again, you can choose not to act at a particular moment in time. Now, usually that's towards the end of the game that occurs, but that is a strategy that people can employ, and it really relates equally to philosophy and war, as well as it made me think of something that we just discussed in verse 11, the importance of space and voids, verse 11 of the Tao on last week. So I just think that the idea of inaction as being a strategy and the importance of understanding when to act, philosophically speaking, is a important thing to consider when you're thinking about the game Go.
Thank you. Philip, you are next.
So yeah, I'm personally, I don't know about these kind of analogies between the game and some sort of why we didn't win the Vietnam War. Yeah, it's weird to me. But anyways, I have a book of that kind of teaches people how to play Go, and the last chapter of this book, it kind of seems interesting because like these are proverbs. So they give you proverbs as a way of teaching strategies about the game of Go. So for example, there's the little proverb calls it, "He who counts wins." And what he means is, when you're playing Go, you count the liberties. So if you have two different stones connected, you increase the liberty. So you always are looking at liberties. You're always looking at liberties of your unit, your group, right? A corollary of the previous proverb was, "He who doesn't count liberties will surely lose." That's a corollary of the first strategy. There's another proverb called "stake a claim." Stake a claim means, you think about a Go board having 4 sides, right? You don't want to build your territory on one of the edges. You want to build a territory on the corner. That way, it's just mathematically is much more easier to get an entire area if you try to claim a corner than a side. So it does have. It seems okay, and I love this proverb. The 1-point jump is never wrong. So in order to connect a region together, this proverb, the 1-point jump is never wrong, is you're supposed to, put stones, consecutive stones next to each other to create your territory. And then there's the expression divide and conquer. And there's all these different proverbs. So it's fascinating of how the game of Go, the way they teach strategy is so kind of, they use proverb to teach strategy. It's interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
But yeah,
go ahead, Philip. Anything?
And as a regular chess player, I would say that chess is inherently a very aggressive game, right? If you're not aggressive in some ways, you will lose. You're trying to, position yourself into a particular position and then do some sort of tactics. It's very tactical and it's very strategic. But I find that the way how Go works is very different. It's much more positional.
Yeah, I think that's a good mention about position. Because I don't know. I remember last week we talked about Han Fei. Okay, Elena is not here today. She talked about the Su and the Si. Okay, and I kind of explained what the Si, and then in the Go game, another important so-called, other than strategy, tactical, another thing called Si, kind of potential, your position. Okay, that's very important. So you have to take a global view on that. That's related to Han Fei. And Phillips also remind me, and also put in the calendar. You probably already heard somebody mentioned the art of war. And another more thing is like a so-called the 36 strategy or 36 tactics. Okay, so I'm going to include this one in one of the section in August. So you get an idea. So it's kind of all related, So Fred, please.
There was perhaps an overemphasis on on winning in our discussion. In that, one of the things I liked about the movie is that they would bring up this the beauty of, what was it, Move 43, and I think that's common to chess, Go, music, perhaps other areas. It's not so much that you edge out the other opponent, but there are these incredible intuitive leaps that are usually, I would 5 years ago, I'd say exclusively human, that which just sets you on your heels. You look at a chess game and you think, okay, what's the next move? And then you see the move that's played by the grandmaster and you just scratch your head like, what on earth is this person thinking? You know, that is the wildest move. I can't imagine how they plan to win the game. And then it all becomes revealed. In the same way with Go, that there are these incredibly intuitive leaps. And the thing that struck me about, one of the things that struck me about the movie is that there seemed to be this recognition that there were a couple of points in the games where the AlphaGo was not merely making a good move, but they were making really a beautiful move, which would be effectively the hallmark of advanced human intelligence. It's not just dumb search of all possible moves. It's like they come up with these truly astounding moves that just set you back, and that is both laudatory and scary that AI could achieve that, because that is previously the purview of unique purview of human beings, is that great intuitive leap.
Thank you, Fred. Let me ask you a quick question. When you watch the movie, are you able to tell or feel the beautiful, how beautiful of that so-called God move?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, you can tell.
It really comes across, even with the deficient knowledge of the game. You just have a feeling that something something incredible just happened.
Okay, you are great.
The tenor of the game changes at that point.
I cannot tell the difference. So you are much higher level. Yeah. Thank you. Have you here?
I actually want to comment on that. I mean, like a lot of as a chess player, I mean, I don't know. I'm not that into Go because I haven't played Go for that long. But as a chess player, a lot of the good games, like for a really good player is Mikhail Tal, and so there are these crazy chess players that are able to produce these wildly crazy great games, but most of it is based on a mistake, right? It is based on a mistake. It takes two to tango. Yeah, I'm not sure if I want to say that the most beautiful game in chess is some beautiful. I think smart is insightful. I'm not sure if beauty is the right word for it. Anyways.
Sounds like you know both games well. So can you tell me, that I'm always curious, do you think these two games have to use different kind of skill? In a way that say you are good at the Go is not necessarily good at chess. You are good at chess, not necessarily good at Go.
I don't know. I don't. Yeah, I think that's a part that interests me, right? It does seem to me that when I'm playing chess, it's different from when I'm playing Go. It uses different types of the part of the brain. It adopts different method of teaching, but I don't know. But I definitely don't. I would not describe certain chess as beautiful, because like most of the beautiful chess games is based on a freaking mistake. Like Paul Morphy's a piano game, right? You guys can Google it, the piano game, right? Sorry, not the piano, the opera game, right? It's based on a on a mistake by the Duke, who's playing Paul Morphy, mainly because he's a terrible chess player, right? Nobody, no modern chess player would play that way. But because one side is such a horrible chess player, they make a mistake, and wow, we have really like fancy combinations happening. Okay, that's pretty much. I don't know enough about Go to.
Okay. Phil, please.
Yeah, now I'm confused what story to tell because they're both important. I'll tell one story first. It'll take a little time, but it's worth it to reveal the main thing. I'm actually a decent chess player, slightly better than I am in Go, but not a lot better. So I'm certainly, not highly ranked. When I was teaching at Penn State, I went to a graduate picnic before the school start. And I happened to carry my chessboard around because I invited my roommate who beat me. I was hoping for a repeat game, but he didn't want to play. He wanted to play baseball, whatever. Okay, so I'm carrying around. And one of the grad students said, "Oh, you ought to play Angelo. He's a master." My immediate reaction was like, a master indeed. Right? Do these people, what an abuse of language, do they understand what a master means? I mean, so I thought that was the abuse of language. Okay, so, but nonetheless, I found Angelo and I played, and he turned out to be really good. And so I said, well, how good are you? Like, would you say that you're a better artist than you are or you're a better chess player? He said, "Oh, I'm a better chess player." So I immediately upped my rank because he now, at least to me, is a very high ranking sergeant or lieutenant, okay? At least, because that's what a graduate student in art would be. I play a little bit more and he turned out to be really good. I mean, really good. I knew I played chess enough to know that he was really good. So I asked him the question like, well, in this community, State College, would include Penn State, what's your guess about how many people are better than you? And he answered immediately by saying, "Oh, I'm the best." Which is sort of astonishing to me because there's a lot of intelligent people. I would have expected him to say, well, 25, no problem. Even if he said 10, okay, I'll swallow it. But when he said, "I'm the best," I'm just sort of say, oh my God, I was shocked. Like, this guy's a bragger, right? So I said, do you just believe that you're the best, or do you have some evidence that you're the best? He says, yes, I do. I said, I'm actually ranked #1 in Central Pennsylvania by the American Chess Federation. Okay, so he was telling me the truth. Next day, he actually bought the book along, and he was ranked #1 in Central Pennsylvania. In fact, 213 in the entire country. So he was not only a master, he was an international master. He was very, very good. I played many games with him. So finally, I never won, by the way, because he was just too good for me. But in any event, I finally at one point asked him, well, how do you play the game of chess? Because, the way you play is very different from me, And he says the way I play it is that I see every move as a potentiality, right? I move the knight here. It's not that I move the knight here, I'm going to attack, but the knight opens up all these possibilities. And when I move the rook over there, now that opens up another gallery of possibilities. And eventually these possibilities, they might not unfold in this way, but if they don't unfold in this particular way, then there's another way to unfold in a different way. So the potentiality, the way he explained how you move in terms of possibilities into the future, of opening up possibilities, I have recognized immediately that he was talking the same game, because that was the same way I approach art. That every move you make opens up possibilities, not the end of the painting, not the end of something, but the possibility for opening up other possibilities. So chess is also very creative in that way, just as Go is open potentiality. But the particular moves are very, very different. So the tactics are very, very different, but they all have this sort of creative mode in terms of opening up the future of what is possible, rather than say, I'll just settle for, taking down the opponent's knight. That's good, right? I got his knight. No, that's not the objective, right? To just kill at first sight. It's just like open up the possibility, because that might set up in some way that you could actually get the queen, right? So that is the potentiality, and you can take that lesson to life. Don't make a move because, okay, I'm going to collect this much money, I'm going to pocket it now. That sounds good. But how does it open up the future? That is very, very important, that you take that creativity of opening possibilities. So that's a very important part that happens in Go and also happens in chess. I'll talk about the other thing later, because that's a very important lesson as well.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so, okay, let's move on. Okay, let's have the Pin, Madeline, and the Kevin, and then we have to quickly move on before the time up. Okay, so Pin, go ahead.
Oh, this is a question for the group. In ancient China, the scholar is supposed to have 4 hobbies: the Go game, playing the Chinese zither, brush calligraphy, and traditional Chinese watercolor. So I think the Go game, as Fred pointed out, it's not, the scholar is not supposed to really play it to win, but play it to gain some insight into life and enlightenment. But the fact that a computer can be programmed to be so good, basically undefeatable in the game of Go, makes you start having doubt, because it seems like it's a very flawed analogy for life. If you're trying to understand life, but it's a game where you can actually program something to win all the time, 100% of the time. So I don't know, I kind of, I started thinking about this as we're all discussing, and I thought I'd throw this out as a teaser, I guess, is like how useful is Go in the analogy of life in helping us deal with life.
Yeah, thank you, Pin. If you read the article also talk about this. The Go game is not, basically it's just like Pin said. That's one of the way to, how do you say it? Practice or exercise your mind. It's not to set to win in a traditional sense. Okay, so let's move on. Madeline and Kevin.
Yeah, there's been a discussion going on in chat about consciousness, emotion, and the playing of Go and computers, which to me is the most interesting thing about all of this. So I thought I would just bring it into the discussion. So for the purposes of this, when I say AlphaGo, I mean this and all successive iterations of the program, no matter what they can do. So whatever else has been developed, I can't remember all the names, I'm just going to call it all AlphaGo. It seems to me that AlphaGo, so it was very telling that in the video that one of the programmers said, we don't think of it as alive. People call it he and she. They think of it as alive, but we're writing code here, and it's not even especially complicated code. And so first of all, we don't have any terms to use for something that's inanimate but does the things that AlphaGo does. In other words, we're using human terms like it learns, it moves, it does this, it does that, when in fact there's no one in there having the experience. So a human being is more like a Swiss Army knife. There are a lot of things that we can do. We can do an incredible number of things, and playing Go is one of them. We have feelings, we have a being inside who is learning and growing in many ways and applying this to different areas of life. And AlphaGo doesn't have that. AlphaGo, it's probably never going to soothe a crying baby. It's never going to dance. There are many things that AlphaGo is not going to do. It's more like a standard car than it is like an actual intelligence. I realize that it's an artificial neural network and blah, blah, blah. It is still not the same thing as an actual experiential being. So that's my position. I've seen other things in chat, and I would love to hear what people have to say about it.
Thank you. We go to let's jump to Rami. You haven't spoke yet, so I let you go first.
Thank
Rami,
you.
please.
In Catherine Hales, when she first came out, with the first edition of How We Became Post-Human, she goes back to the Turing test, and in the Turing test, she finds a sort of an interesting aspect of it that really wasn't, I think, discovered before she found this. I don't know, maybe someone else did, but they didn't publish about it. And what she found was that in the Turing test, of course, for anyone who's not familiar, you're given a terminal and you're typing messages to them and you're getting messages back. And the question is that a human being on the other end? Well, Hales asked, is that person, she asked the engendered question, is this a man or a woman that I'm speaking with? And again, AlphaGo is this very narrow set of wind territory neural network. So in that like way, I've been reading the chat as well. I've been wondering, well, yes, we can create a thing that will capture the territory, but not only is gender like a reproductive strategy, but it also is an embodiment. So does AlphaGo have a body? And because it doesn't necessarily, I mean, it has a body in that it's inside of hardware, but it is so narrow and so specific. Does it have, the heart of it is Go is there to try to help you as a human being to be able to develop. But if we're handing it off to these machines and letting them play against each other, it really is a different sort of situation. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, well, we kind of running out of time. We have a lot of hands up, so let's have kind of limit your conversation a little bit shorter, so we can move through. But of course, you are welcome to stay after 3 o'clock. But I just want to respect to the time. People have a different schedule, and as a general rule, I will let the person who haven't spoke speak first. Okay, Michael.
Yeah, so I was not a developer of AlphaGo, but I have experience in developing something similar. It's detect and avoid systems for aircraft, which is supposed to be a system that would avoid collisions with other aircraft. So we did it for research purpose, but it could be also used on real aircraft as well. So I can relate to this question about emotions and whether a system like this can feel something, can experience emotions. So there are two aspects of this. One is a functional role of emotions. So our emotions are not just for our joy or pleasure or whatever. They play a functional role. They help mobilize our resources. They help allocate energy and attention to the tasks that we have to accomplish. And in this sense, there is no much difference between these artificial systems that we are creating for similar goals and ourselves. But another question is what a system itself feels or what it experiences. And for this, we don't have a good way to answer this, because this is the matter of self-introspection, self-observation. And I only can feel directly what I feel when I am doing something. But I don't have a way to feel what you feel. I can guess And I can have a fairly good guess because I assume that people are similar in this respect. But for systems that are so different, like a system playing computer games or protecting the aircraft from collisions and so on, we just don't know. But by analogy, I would suspect that any system that has the goals and has to mobilize some resources to achieve these goals, maybe it can feel something, maybe. But I don't see how it can be proven or otherwise.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Phil, Philip, and Sanjay.
Yeah, so I just want to comment on this idea. I think that the story of Go, the Go, it's definitely not a gym for your mind. It's not like, I don't think the original intent in ancient China about playing Go and doing calligraphy is a way of jacking up your IQ, and it's not a gym for your IQ or your brain. It shouldn't, well, it helps, but those are the means to an end, which is moral education, right? To achieve the moral life, to achieve the ethical person, right? Nowadays, I think there is this tendency of seeing people as a tool. I mean, like IQ as a feature of a person. If you want to, to be good at something, just hire a PhD, and he's a pretty good tool. I mean, everyone in some sense in the world right now has to be, in some sense, to be a function in our society, is to be a tool, a very functioning tool, right? But having a moral education or a moral person is different from being a tool or having high IQ or being really good at math competitions, right? It's about staking a claim about what is right in the world and going about changing it, right? I mean, think about spiritual leaders, like Martin Luther King, right? Or think about Mahatma Gandhi, right? What did these people do? These people saying that the world is the state of the current world is wrong. The reason why it's wrong is because it's contrary to the moral law. Because of that, it needs to be changed. So Go develops something like that. That is infinitely more powerful than being a tool. So there's a little bit difference. Being a PhD is not sufficient. Being a moral person that can stake a claim in the world and freaking changing it is the height of what a moral education is supposed to be. All right.
Thank you, Philip. Next one should be Phil, please. Sorry.
Just one thing first before I didn't understand the God move. It's too advanced for me. because it reminded me what Bobby Fischer played Boris Spassky at Iceland, the first game where he lost, and when he made a mistake. And I remember there was like 3 or 4, grandmasters commenting like, well, looks like he made a mistake. Looks like he made, but that was Bobby. There must be something deeper. We don't understand. So for a while they were like confused because it was just sort of so outrageous and like, oh, okay, but Bobby must know, right? Because Bobby was so advanced. So that's when I got the clue that maybe Bobby Fischer made a mistake, because I didn't understand that. But to get back to the point, it's similar to Philip's point, but it's quite different. I thought the most important game was the 5th game, not the 4th game, when the human being won, because he made the God move. But what I saw in the 5th game was that somehow the computer recognized that this opponent could actually make a God move. In other words, the computer understands the system and understand everything within the system in such detail that even human beings don't understand the rules to the degree it understand. This God move seemed to be outside of the understanding of the system. And and the computer wasn't going to make this mistake again. So halfway through, he was, I put the he, but it was anticipating, this guy could possibly make another God move. I'm going to force it to play my game that I know I'm going to win. Yeah. Okay. So he starts switching to this other play of forcing a tactical game that he know he's going to play because he's very good. It was very good at this tactical game, and it was already winning. And so everybody was surprised. Well, that must be like a really important, because it's so strange. We don't understand it. And then finally, they finally realized he was playing a tactical game. Yeah. He was going to win the game. He was going to win. It was going to win the game. Is going to win. Not preventing the other guy from making another God move, because he knew that was the only possibility. What I got from that lesson was that it was a metaphor, not necessarily about the computers, that you live in a society where you could be creative, but the power structures in the system is so powerful that it could force you to play the game at hand, so you could never become creative enough to overthrow the system. That's what the computer taught us, that the system could actually always play the power game, because you as a human being needs a certain amount of sustenance. You need a job, you need this, and you know to a certain degree is a compromise, but you do need it. And the system is so powerful, it's going to make you jobless, and you're going to fight it with the ethics, but the ethics is not enough. There's other factors you have to take care of, and it's going to force you to play in the system, even though you don't want to play in the system. That's a lesson I learned, that power can finally actually overcome creativity, because I understand that you could be creative enough to transcend power, and it's not going to let you be creative, because now you're forced to do the mundane day-to-day things to keep your head above the water. That's what I learned, and that's what the computer figured out, that it was going to win the game by forcing you to play its game rather than letting you make the God move of creativity.
Yeah,
that was a very important insight that the computer made.
I agree. That's an important lesson. So next one we go to Sanjay. But before Sanjay speak, let me ask Sanjay, are you able to make for next week?
I didn't check my schedule. I don't.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
not
I
sure.
hope you can. Because next week I'm going to go through the Heart Sutra, and then they have some Sanskrit words. I think if you were here, it would be better to explain it. If you can, that would be helpful. You know, so just if you can, I hope you make it. So I will try my best, but they have some Sanskrit words, and if you can explain that would be better. And I would like to hear how does it read in Sanskrit. Yeah, thank you.
So,
thank you.
Also, Sanjay, if you're hosting this event, I'm gonna invite you to the Slack group, and I think Amjo is gonna be there as well. So you can, Amjo is a very knowledgeable. He's the one that lead our Monday academic philosophy group. So Sanjay, I invite you to the Slack group where you can, talk to Amjo and, and Jason as well.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Sanjay. Yeah.
So so about this, I mean, I was so just I wanted to tie it a little bit back to the philosophy that we began, with Neo-Confucianism, and one of the things in the movie, in the AlphaGo movie, that Fan Hui, he was the first championship, the European championship that AlphaGo competed against, and some comments that he made in the movie I think were very prescient. He basically described Go as being a mirror that reflected life, and what he was saying to me, what he was saying was that Go embodied the philosophy of life, of human philosophy, one branch of human philosophy. It described one way of being. Perhaps, I mean, I would describe it as being quiet, as being reposed advancement in a game where you have gradual, iterative advancement, hopefully to win. And so Fan Hui really described this element that Go represented a purely Eastern, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Far Eastern philosophy. And the movie described the competition between AlphaGo and him. So one of the things in the movie was that it was portrayed as a one-on-one competition, AlphaGo versus Lee Sedol. But the Eastern community did not see it that way. They saw it in a very different way. They saw it as AlphaGo against all of humanity. Okay? And this is the fundamental difference, I think, in the philosophical nature that we're talking about, is that almost all Eastern cultures that I've experienced and know about look at the world as primarily as a society, as a group of people, as cohesive. And a simplified version of Western philosophy is as individuals. And that's what this competition that AlphaGo symbolized, was this individual machine against this individual human. That's one way that people in the West looked at it. However, in the East, people saw it as this individual machine against all of humanity, all of the capability of humanity in this complex game of Go. The other thing that AlphaGo represented was that it really did not, and Madeline kind of asked about this, and about what AI is capable of and things like that. So AlphaGo is not really a sophisticated artificial intelligence system. It is one of the precursors, and maybe in a few decades we might have a system that is more capable that we would call a general AI, but AlphaGo and even its successor, which is called Mu-Zero now, that's the most advanced version that DeepMind has yet, that they've discussed openly. Even that is not general AI. It cannot do anything that a human can. So we need to understand that these systems don't have any understanding of what they're doing in the human sense. They don't have a philosophy of life as human players do when they're playing Go. These systems are basically, and they're not simply mathematical. A neural network is very different. It is much closer to a human brain than, for example, what Deep Blue was. The IBM system that beat Garry Kasparov, the reigning world champion at the time. Those systems were very, very different. These AlphaGo and Mu-Zero systems are much more sophisticated and much more human-like, much more animal-like in their neural processing. The last point I wanted to say is again, I don't remember who made the analogy, but they talked about whether one of these systems can do what people can do. For example, cuddle a baby or dance or become an Olympic athlete. Now, these are characteristics of humans, and these systems cannot do that. That's true. But the correct analogy, the correct comparison would be to ask whether a human infant can do any of those things. And we know the answer is no. A human infant can do none of those things, yet a human infant is capable of learning to do most of those things. That's what's important for us to understand. And similarly, these systems, especially when we're talking about general AI, current scientists believe that the more advanced AIs will be capable of doing much the same things that the humans can. And whether they'll have the philosophies that we have, that's an open question.
Yeah,
that's the most interesting question, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Sanjay. We go to James, Kevin, and Pin, and Audrey. James, please.
Yeah. Thanks for Sanjay for that. And you're kind of like saying that AI could become so much like a human that they could replace the human, and as though we are competing with the AI on the same level as if we can compete with a car or a jet plane or a something like a calculator. But that's so we're getting away from thinking about AI as a tool, which is, I think, the right way to look at it. And of course you can't compete with a tool that we make, right? So why do we think that that we should even compete with an AI on any game at all, right? Because that's to fall into the trap of thinking that they can replace us ultimately. And I think I'm kind of like trying to push back against that for myself, that no matter how much you can replicate with AI, replicate a human being, it's not going to be a human being, right? So that's kind of like you know, and the game of Go would just like you know, painting or calligraphy was a way for, you know, human beings to develop their minds and to you know, achieve kind of self-understanding and artistic creativity and expression, you know. And to say that a computer can do the same thing and that we should compete with them is kind of like ludicrous, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, James. Kevin, please.
Yes, thank you. I thought of this hand before you mute me.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a difficult subject. I know we are dealing with
Okay.
a huge subject today.
Yeah,
and
I'm going to follow this, James, you know, and also Sanji. I'm going to put some of the different idea here. First, let's see why we made the tools like AI, why compete with them. Look at our jobs. Look, let's see, from a warehouse 20 years ago, and now look at Amazon warehouse. How many people there over there? So it's good or bad. That's another topic. That's definitely affect our life. Second one, if you talk about AI, why AI should like a human? They kind of act there alone. Then why we care about the consciousness and emotion? We make a decision, emotion, how much help based on our emotion. If based emotion all along, AI is based on logic. If you want to random, let's see no smell or something, all they can mimic. And if you want to, let's see how I defeat you, the Go game or other game, I can use different ways to defeat you, not just one way. So, and then back to another topic, is competitive games. I would say the international chess, normal chess is centralized around the king. King is usually no power, so we have to protect them. And the Go is decentralized. But each move, the place matters. You have occupied a good stand over there, you know, for the next move help you. So also yesterday, actually, 52 ruling the top of the rules and norms. In the Go, the same rules are simple, but those norms, those pattern, the Ping mentioned a good term, the pattern in computer science, like AI, computer learning, big data, that patterns matter. They see the pattern looks good, they look a good chance to win. So if let's see instead we used let's see our regular chess, base point based, or one queen 9 point. That could be double the second next rook, the 5 point. 2 rook maybe not like people like use queen, they can powerful than the queen. So most like a queen is like almost half of the power of the game. So if you lose a queen, impossible your game will end. So, and yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Pin next.
Yeah, I just want to echo some of the previous points. To me, this is kind of a Zhuangzi point of view. Is we only think the computer won and the human lost because of the way we see it. If you see the game as the winner who actually learned something about life, the human has always won. The computer has never won. Even when in the cases when the computer won, what happened was the programmers, which are a bunch of humans, learned something about how they improve their algorithm. So it's all how we define things. And if we keep getting attached to winning, who surrounded more territories on a dumb piece of wooden board, then we'll always lose to the AI. Yes, but in reality, is that true? I don't know.
I think we always win. Doesn't matter. You know? Yeah, we should read more Zhuangzi. You know. So, Audrey, please.
I actually really appreciated what James had to say, because I was thinking along those lines. But I also have, you know, some younger brothers, and who work in factories, and they're nervous every time something, anybody talks about AIs and what they can do. I mean, there are AIs that are becoming companions, and they're great subject for like speculative fiction for film. I love to read about it. I love to watch about it. But I understand there is some concern about, there's some craven ways that, what could be another level of artistic, whether it's higher or lower level of artistic creativity and freedom to try new things and to explore, which is really what humanity seems to be about, exploring and just pushing those edges. But there's a craven way of viewing it, and there's craven people who can utilize that information but from what I understand, there's a way to fight against it, and I'm not quite sure about how that is for people, and that jobs can actually be replaced, and that's a whole different view of it has to do with the people doing it. It doesn't have to do with the machine. So it's interesting. That's all. It's something to think about. And then figure out what your right action would be in a particular situation.
Actually, it's a lot of things to think about. Yeah, thank you. Pin and Phil go first, and then Pin.
Yeah, I must be misunderstanding the whole game because I did not see it as computer versus man. Okay, and everybody seemed to be focused on becoming paranoid, because the machine is going to replace us, it's going to be smarter. That's not the point that I'm making. That is a point, but that's not the point I'm making. I'm making the point that the system itself exposes the fact that it has the power to crush anybody who goes against the system, because it will force you to play the systematic game that, in a sense, in order to survive. So whether you talk about Neo-Confucianism or the World Monetary Fund or the trading network, it is structured in such a way that you have very little room to move, to express yourself, because you probably finally have to pay for the rent. And it warns you at every moment that you could be jobless and sleeping on the sidewalks of Los Angeles in a way. So you better play the game. You're forced to play the game, even if you don't want to. If you think your moral force is going to be able to overcome that at every instance, you could just forget about it. So watch out for that kind of tyranny, whether that comes in a machine form or whether it comes in a mechanical, systematic, machine-like form in a social structure, that it doesn't allow you to express and make the God move, because God does not need to eat. You need to eat. And so therefore, watch out for any tyrannical system in itself, not at the limitation, not necessarily the computer, any tyrannical system. That was the point, that was the metaphor I was making, not about fear the machine. That could be fearful, but in this case, I was thinking that the computer recognized it could force you to play its game, whether you like it or not.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah, I got your point, but I think everybody have a same point. Who's next? Rami and Madeline Phillips. Okay.
Yeah, there have been competitions where the name of the game is you write the program to play the other ongoing competition. So it's another class of gameplay.
Okay. Okay. We have Jerry. Jerry haven't spoke yet. Let's have Jerry go first. Jerry? No? Okay, that's fine. Let's go. Who's next? Madeline?
Yes, Phil had mentioned Neo-Confucianism, which I recall from about a lifetime ago. We were discussing that. And so that got me onto a little train of thought about how would the ancient Neo-Confucianists have seen AlphaGo? And so I'm going to just put out there the idea that they would have seen it as a very useful tool. In other words, if you transported it back in time in a time machine, but explained to them that this was a tool that humans had made, it was a thought system, something like that it had a mechanism, something like a very complicated clock tower or water mill or I forget the name of it, not astrolabe, but I'm sure someone here knows what I mean. That they would understand that and they would see it as something to be used within the existing social structure. And they would be probably very much on top of not letting it change that structure. They would want to keep whatever their thing was, they would want to keep it that way. So I just thought I would put that out there as a kind of a talking point.
Thank you, Madeline. Phillips. And yeah, Phillips, yeah, you're next.
Yeah, I just want to go back. I think Phil is not me, but Phil, the other Phil. Okay.
Oh, really?
I think he's saying that something about you know, chess or Go being very restrictive, it restrain your creativity. I take the opposite view. I think that if you see Go as a way of moral cultivation, right, which is the end goal of all Chinese philosophy. The Chinese scholarship is about moral education. What is moral education? To me, moral education is about how you go about conducting yourself in a social environment, in the context of you having a job, in the context of you being a boss, or you being part of the social web. So remember, we are Confucians, not Taoists, right? Taoists want to go to the forest and live by themselves, but Confucius believe wholeheartedly that we live within a social net of relationships. You're supposed to be the alpha in that social net. That's the whole point. Having a moral education makes you an alpha in that social net. You're not an alpha of computer programming. It's not just to be an alpha, you have to be the alpha of the social net, be a politician somewhat. Moral education is about getting, gathering people, connecting people together for the righteous cause. And because if there's not a righteous cause, nobody will follow you. All right. So I think that the purpose of Go is to develop the moral man, and the moral man is a socially embedded man. And to be good socially is to become the alpha in that social net. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Philip. Yeah. Pin, please. Oh, just remind everybody right now it's overtime, but you're